Hi everyone. My name is Kirke Simson, and I'm from Rahvusvahelise Suhete Ring, Research Society of International Relations in the University of Tartu. So I'm from Estonia. But welcome to the virtual Nordic Convention on International Affairs 2020. You are watching the second session of the conference right now. Earlier today, we got to see a panel about Arctic security. And this Nordic Convention on International Affairs is an annual conference and is created by and mainly for students and young people from the Nordics and Baltics with an interest in foreign affairs and international politics. This year's event is in collaboration between the Finnish Association of International Affairs, the Danish Foreign Policy Society, International Debate at the University of Copenhagen, Rahvusvahelise Suhete Ring, and the Swedish Association on International Affairs, together with its member associations. This panel here is titled Future of the EU, a Nordic Perspective. During the next hour, we will explore visions forward for the European Union from the point of view of three young Nordic panelists, Hanna Waerland-Fager and Iiris Asunmaa. We will also comment and Jakob Kjeldsen Wind. We will also comment a bit on Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's State of the EU speech that she delivered at the European Parliament 3 days ago. And it is now my pleasure to introduce to you our panelists. Iiris Asunmaa is the president of the organization JEF Finland, or Eurooppanuoret in Finnish, meaning the Finnish Young Europeans. Hanna Waerland-Fager is a program manager at the Swedish organization Folk och Försvar, meaning society and defense. She is also one of the official Swedish EU youth representatives, and there's also Jakob Kjeldsen Wind from European Youth Copenhagen University. The panel will be moderated by Sakke Teerikoski, former president of the Swedish Association of International Affairs and future thinker of the Swedish think tank Global Utmaning, meaning global challenge. So I wish you all an interesting session and interesting panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirke. And it's my pleasure to take over as moderator of this session. I hope my audio is loud and clear and that I am not accidentally muted, which is often the case in all Zoom panels. I see some thumbs up over there. So basically, it's my great pleasure to moderate the panel on the future of the EU and giving you a Nordic perspective from the Nordic countries that are members of the European Union. So we have young participants from Finland, Sweden, and Denmark in this panel. A few things before we start. You are now all on Zoom, and for those of you who haven't done Zoom seminars that much before, which I'm sure that everyone in this room actually have, you can rotate between, you can change between gallery view or speaker view as you please during this event. Also, please know that the event is being recorded. So later on, if you have a question and you want to ask it live, your question will also be recorded. During the event, while we are going ahead, you have the opportunity to ask questions at any time as you wish. You do that by writing your question into the chat. And then later on during the Q&A session, I will pick your questions from there, or I will get help from the tech support to do so. And then we will ask those questions to the panelists. But you may also, if you really want, also raise your hand, and then use a Zoom function, raising hand, meaning like you raise the blue hand in the participants menu, and then I can also pick you to ask a question live. But that is only in the Q&A session at the very end. But questions in the chat you can post at any time. All right. And the outline of this panel today, it will be basically in 3 parts. So in the beginning, the panelists will get to present themselves a bit more and share what they are doing, their roles and their visions and viewpoints for the future of the European Union and the role of the Nordic countries in it. And after that, we will also go and dig deep a bit giving an analysis on the State of the Union speech that was given by Commission President Ursula von der Leyen 3 days ago at the European Parliament. Her speech was 1.5 hours. This panel is shorter than that, so we will not have the time to cover everything. But I'm still sure that we will be able to give some comments on the main takeaways of our panelists from her speech. that is going to be the second half of this session, and then finally moving on to Q&A, so where you will be able to ask questions to our amazing panelists. So let me get going with it and turn to the first panelist. So present yourself a bit more and tell us about your current role and your visions and viewpoints for the future of the EU from a Nordic perspective. Iiris, let's start with you.
Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me loud and clear, right? Yeah, I see nodding. Okay, yeah. It's a very great pleasure to be attending this panel discussion. Last year I was in Lund in the same event, and it was live, but I think we can work this webinar as well. To sum up the year, we have had a lot of webinars, and I think this one has been one of the most best organized ones that I have attended, so thank you for that. I work as a president of the JEF Finland, or Eurooppanuoret, or European Youth as it translates to English. We are an organization with around 2,000 Finnish youngsters from ages 15 to 29. And our goal is to work as a platform for the young people to discuss European affairs and give them experts and politicians to discuss with, but also influence the European politics and especially the Finnish European politics to make sure that the young people are heard there. We have several like regional or local organizations as well. They are mostly around university cities in Finland, but from Lapland to Helsinki, so all across the country. Outside the organizational work, I work as a specialist on EU affairs with the city of Jyväskylä, which is the 7th largest city in Finland, in central Finland, and it's very sunny here, so if you ever visit Finland, please come to Jyväskylä. I always have to give credits for the city because I love it so much. But anyway, about the future of Europe, I think, well, the future of Europe has been one of our 2 key themes this year with JEF Finland. One has been climate, which is also a key thing for the future, but the other is Europe 2050. So we want to look 30 years ahead, which I think is something that isn't usually done. And I think during the COVID situation and the new budget, there's a lot of talk on where the EU is going, and there is a lot of talk in Finland that we need to talk about where the EU is going, but not actually no one is really talking about what we want to see in the future. So, and also Finland has been a member of the European Union as Sweden as well for 25 years this year. So we added a couple of zeros and we got the Europe 2050 theme from there. We created our sort of like utopia or vision for how we as youth want to see the Europe in 2050. And as a background, I can tell you that we did a survey on the viewpoints that young Finns have for the EU, and over 80% of Finnish youth are pro-EU. And I think that is something that is a quite lot, and we were very surprised for it. But then again, the young people don't talk about the EU that much. So this is something that we want to tackle as well. But the Europe in 2050, if you ask JEF Finland, is a federal Europe that is climate neutral and has a strong voice in global politics. It also relies on democratic institutions, and we value welfare states, democratic participation, innovations, and human rights. So in a nutshell, that is where we want to see the Europe going in the future years. And I think all these themes are something that, for example, climate solution, welfare states, innovations are very highly valued in all Nordic countries. So I think there is a lot of cooperation there that we can lead as Nordic youth But I think I will give the floor to other speakers now, because this is something that I would like to talk about 3 hours in a row. But I think we can move on to the discussion and then discuss a bit more.
Thank you very much, Iiris, and I hope that I am still audible. Moving on to Hanna next, Sweden. Tell us about your role, a very exciting role, being the Swedish European youth representation of the country together with one other colleague in that role. What's your visions and viewpoints?
Yes, so first of all, I'm very pleased to be here. I was also in Lund last year at the Nordic Convention of International Affairs. It was a great event, and I'm very happy that this event is now digital, or that you have transformed this great platform to a digital version, since this is the only way possible in these times. But yes, I can start with my current position. So it's a big thanks to the UFS, or the Swedish Association on International Affairs, why I have this position, because this association nominated to me this position to me, and I'm currently then Sweden's youth representative to the EU. And before, I've also been the president of the UFS, so I'm Sakke's predecessor to the position. And I can just shortly summarize that being one of 2 youth representatives from Sweden to the EU, I have the mission to represent both youth and youth organization in something called EU Youth Dialogue. And the Youth Dialogue is a forum for joint reflection, but also consultation on priorities, implementation, and follow-up on European cooperation in the field of youth. So basically youth policy. And the foremost aim is to bring together young people with decision makers in order to work to implement the current EU youth strategy, but also to implement 11 EU youth goals. And I, together with my Swedish colleague, we are the representative for the 8th cycle, which is a period of 18 months. And we will work under the trio presidency of the chair states, so to call, Germany, Portugal, and Slovenia. And these countries have decided to focus on a specific thematic priority for this 8th cycle, which is, or it's called Europe for Youth, Youth for Europe, Space for Democracy and Participation. And this, in practical terms, means that we will work specifically with number 9 of the EU goals, which is space and participation for all. So in this mission, I will conduct consultations with young people and youth organizations around Sweden, and I will also represent the Swedish youth at 3 different EU conferences, and also together with other EU representatives for the other EU member states, we will form concrete recommendation, actual politics that we will put forward to the minister or the Council of Youth Ministers in the end of this cycle. That will also be voted through by the youth ministers. I don't know, Sakke, do you want me to also present my vision for the future of the EU now, or do you want to present the next speaker before?
You can do it now, I think. We are proceeding well on time, so I will present Jakob directly after that.
Okay, but then I would like to start with actually a statement that was presented by the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen earlier this week. And that was, the future will be what we make it, and Europe will be what we want it to be. And for me, I would say that this statement underscores the need to work quite hard for the EU cooperation, and also a statement that I believe says, if we don't do it together, nobody will. And here I can make a reference, for example, to the EU Commission's The New Green Deal, And I believe that Ursula von der Leyen made it quite clear in her speech on Wednesday that the EU must lead in order to tackle, for example, this major global challenge. Otherwise, no one else will take those very hard steps forward by themselves. But also the statement, Europe will be what we want it to be. This can also be reference to the statement where we are today. And that, I believe, underlies the challenges of the very different views and perspective we see in the EU. For example, we see a political landscape with a high degree of polarization of political views and how a society should look like and what the political solutions are. And therefore, I also think that the EU will in the future have a hard time to be an effective political player. Nonetheless, even though that will be the case, there is no reason for why the EU countries together shouldn't try to come together and make the EU cooperation stronger. And as I said before, I believe the future of the EU will have a hard time to face many global challenges together. We have seen many bumps in the road during the corona pandemic, and when many countries as well, both within the union and outside of the union, take small steps away from fundamental democratic values and rights, the EU, so to say, liberal democracies will be affected by this development. For example, authoritarian countries like China and Russia today have an impact and will have an impact on the dynamics of the EU cooperation, and both when it comes to economic issues but also geopolitical issues. But here I think the Nordic countries play a key role and a vital role. First of all, according to public opinion polls or surveys, for example the Eurobarometers, all countries or the citizens in Sweden, Denmark, Finland have a quite high trust towards the EU. And speaking from the Sweden's perspective from the political parties, 7 out of 8 parties in the European or in the Swedish Parliament are positive towards the EU cooperation. And with that mix of high trust from citizens in the EU together with the political leadership, I believe that those countries can play a vital role and a constructive player in the EU. However, and this is a little bit what Iiris mentioned, that I believe from the Sweden's perspective as well, that as you mentioned on the Finland case, that Sweden also have lacked a common EU line. This was quite clear before the European Parliament election last year, when a lot of the political debates surrounded or were about more national politics than EU politics. And also this summer, when Sweden together with the Frugal Four was not really successful during the summer budget negotiations. Instead, today we will see a union actually where future generation and me and other young people will have to pay back for joint EU loans because of the quite large grants and loans in the next generation EU, this recovery and resilience facility. And if you like it or not, or that is not the matter for me, but during the upcoming years ahead, I think this is a quite good example to just state that if you want to have an influence as a member state country in the EU, you have to have a quite clear line of what you want in the future. And here I think Sweden, Denmark and Finland can do a lot together to have a joint statement as the countries had earlier this year. But also each country for themselves have to, if you want to have an influence, you have to have a clear position on what you want. And this especially when you have to negotiate with quite large countries like, for example, Germany and France, because you need to know what you want in order to have an influence. And I think I will stay there for now, and get back with more visions ahead. Thank you, Sakke.
Thank you, Hanna. I was just about to cut you off there as well. I think that knowing what you want, that's a good conclusion. Now moving on to a person who is sitting in the city, which was actually originally meant to be the host city of the Nordic Convention 2020, so Copenhagen. We weren't able to go to Copenhagen due to the pandemic, but at least we are able to have, as a panelist, a person from Young Europeans Copenhagen. So welcome Jakob Kjeldsen Wind to the panel as well. And of course, the same questions go to you. What is your role in your association? Present yourself and your visions and viewpoints for the future of the EU.
Well, thank you so much, Sakke. I'm pleased to be here. I think it's an amazing event about the Nordic and young Europeans in the North perspective on the future of the EU. It's really relevant now. It's been more relevant than ever, I think, because of this pandemic. It's a new time for Europe. It's a historic time. And I'm pleased to help shaping it. We are all shaping it today, us panelists and all you watching. We can shape Europe, and we are shaping Europe in a hopefully better way. Well, first an introduction of me. I am Vice President of European Youth Copenhagen. I'm sort of colleagues with Iiris. We are both part of the JEF, the Young European Federalists, although we do not wish to call ourselves federalists in Denmark. We are just young Europeans. Federalism is not that big a thing in Denmark, but yeah, perhaps that will change. I hope so. European Youth Copenhagen is a local section in what we call JEF, or European Youth Denmark. I have been a member for over 2 years now, and we have in total nationwide we have 500 members, and the Copenhagen section is the largest with 325. So we are a pretty big youth association. I am also a member of the Danish Foreign Policy Society, and a member of our political committee in European Youth Denmark, where I help shape our resolutions, our political standpoint as a youth association. Well, if I can just talk a little history about Denmark's relationship with the EU, just to get myself to speak about the future of the EU. I would say that we have a awkward relationship with the EU right now, and it's become even more awkward after the recent budget negotiations and the COVID crisis and all that stuff. We are an old member of the EU. We became a member in 1973 with the UK and with Ireland. So we are an older member than Finland and Sweden. But that doesn't mean we are closer to Europe. I would in fact state the opposite. We have our 4 opt-outs. We are not part of we're not part of 4 things in the EU. We don't have the euro. We don't are part of the defense cooperation. We are not a part of the police and the justice, including Schengen negotiations in the EU. We are part of the Schengen, but we can't really decide anything about the Schengen. So we are in we put ourselves in a difficult standpoint. The Danes, they don't want to abolish these opt-outs, so our hands are kind of tied together. And it's really weird to look at from an outside perspective, because the support for the European Union has never been higher in Denmark, and especially with young people. But we want to keep our opt-outs with everything. We want to fight for these opt-outs, especially our current government and previous governments. We have tried to get rid of them, but we haven't been successful at all. And I think it's a shame that Denmark is in this position. And it also means that it's limited what we can do about shaping the future of the union, because we can't really decide much. We don't want to decide, I would say. We haven't even had a Europe strategy. We haven't had one since 2012, and we don't have a foreign policy strategy. and we are just about to negotiate one, but it's also been many years since that. And you know, if I can just talk about the COVID-19 pandemic in Denmark, as we are all part of the Frugal Four here, both Finland and Sweden. I think it's a huge shame. I'm embarrassed to be a Dane by our Frugal Four membership. I'll not complain. I think it's I can complain another time about this and even more. But this is a pretty good example of how Denmark actually tries to shape Europe, because we are actually not trying to shape Europe at all, I would say. Not only because of our opt-outs, we can do something even with the opt-outs, but we have just chosen not to do anything. We actually, especially the Frugal Four and the budget negotiation has shown that Denmark is uninterested in Europe. We have a more positive government now, which has some thoughts about the future of the EU. Especially we care much about the rule of law and the democratic deficit in Eastern Europe, in Central and Eastern Europe. Of course, we are talk about climate. Climate is a really important issue in Denmark. We have a huge climate mandate. Our government has a climate mandate from people. We talked last year when Denmark had the national elections about a climate mandate and a climate election. And that's some of the things we have tried to actually fight for in the EU. But as with the Frugal Four, we're not really that interested. We care more about money. How much how much do we give? How much can we have back? And not really. We do not really care about anything else. It's a bit harsh to say, but I think that's definitely true. We didn't even talk when the budget negotiation was there. We didn't even talk about the democratic deficit, how we can use this money that the EU is pushing out in the member states, how we ensure that this money are not being corrupted and used for the purposes that they're not supposed to be used for. But I think that's an important part of the future of Europe from the Danish perspective is, of course, the climate change. I think that's the only thing about Europe we can really be proud of. We are, and it's the same thing with Finland and Sweden, of course, that we are climate fighters in every sense, and we have a higher carbon emissions reduction targets than any other member states. We are much further than any member state, and that's what we try to fight for in Europe too. But again, we've seen a reluctance with the government to actually fight for a higher carbon emission target. We can see Commissioner von der Leyen in her State of the Union, she talked about raising the goal to 55% carbon emissions reduction compared to 1990. Denmark has, I think, 70%, but we do not wish to fight for that in the European center and in the European sense. Even though we want that, we actually wish to do so. And if we look back at the past year in Denmark, we can also see our relationship with the United States, not only Europe, but also the Danish relations with the United States. Trump tried to buy Greenland. I think it hurt, it was a really bad thing for our relationship with the United States, and it has been not been better since then. But we have a lot of possibilities for cooperation with the US. I can say the Arctic region, for example, and we are also, as Hanna talked about, our rivalry with China and Russia, our systemic rivalries, where I think that Europe has been too soft to actually do something. So that's also something I want to see improve. and I think we'd be much tougher on China, to use the words of Donald Trump. And we have to make sure that China doesn't buy our critical infrastructure in Europe, the 5G network. You have some brilliant firms in Sweden, Ericsson and Nokia and Iiris, that can provide these 5G networks, for example. I think we need to push harder for those things to be a reality, so we don't have to buy from Chinese firms. And also we have seen China is generally buying more infrastructure. It's buying property in Europe. We've seen that in Greece. There's a port in Greece that was more or less bought by a Chinese company, and this is really, this relates very much to the Danish position and our lack of willingness to invest in Europe and use money in Europe, because it's the best investment at all you can do is investing in Europe. Because
thank you, Jakob. I will actually cut you off at all you can do is invest in Europe. I think that's a good part to pause, and I will just before we move on to the second part of the panel to go and analyze a bit of the State of the Union speech by Ursula von der Leyen, I will just briefly still give the word back to Iiris. I noticed Iiris was shaking her head when you mentioned that Finland was also part of the Frugal Four. So no, but yeah, that's not, although not the thing that I wanted to address to you, Iiris, but more this going back to the vision of the Europe in 2050. Can you just briefly take a couple of minutes to highlight some of the topics that you have been discussing or highlighting through this campaign?
Well, yeah. First of all, I want to comment to Jakob and Hanna's speech, because I related to so many things that you said there. Finland wasn't part of the Frugal Four, but I think that was more because we didn't have any vision. I think we would have been if we had created some vision for the budget negotiations. But yeah, and also like what Hanna said about the budget discussions, that we're only discussing about the Europe, like how much we pay and how much we get, about the net payments, when it should be more about how we use the money. Because like for a Finnish a citizen, the EU membership for the next generation EU budget, it's cheaper than Netflix. And that is like something that you really don't realize, because we always say it's too expensive. That's like the only discussion that there is. But if you like compare it to other things, it's really not that much. But okay, we have had 6 or 5 and one more to come webinars on the Europe 2050 during this autumn. We started in August, and now we have next week our final discussion. We have had members of the European Parliament discussing with us their future views on the EU, but also like megatrends and climate. We have had experts this week. We talked about cybersecurity, and those have been like very eye-opening discussions, because we are living now in a crisis with the COVID situation, and it would be very easy to talk about the crisis and how we get through it, and that is also very important. But I think what the whole world is missing is like the bravery to look far ahead, like not just like next period until the next elections, but like far ahead in the future. Because if we don't stop and look up and like where are we going, then we just like keep making the same mistakes, and just the status quo is there. And like as Jakob said, there needs to be more vision, I think, for the Nordic states or Nordic countries. I'm a federalist, so I'm talking about the Nordic states in the Federation of Europe. Well, not yet, but for the Nordic countries there, because if we sort of join together, we have a stronger voice in the EU as well. So it's just, I think we have a lot of power there as well. But I think that the key message that we have have gotten from the experts and the politicians that we have discussed with during these recent weeks is that I think they are quite optimistic, and that is something that I think it's for a youth, it's sometimes very hard to come by because of the anxiety with the climate issues and the corona situation and the death, as you mentioned. It's like very, sometimes and if you read the news, it's very hard to stay positive and keep have the faith in the future as well. So I think the key message has been that the world is changing and we have new innovations in such a rapid speed that the odds are that things are going to be a lot better in 2050. So I'm going to hold on to that.
Thank you very much. And then we move on to discussing the State of the EU speech by Ursula von der Leyen. So 3 days ago, she walked into the European Parliament and really gave a speech where she also brought up some of the more optimistic elements about the future, Europe's strengths, Europe's opportunities. And now I would like to get some takeaways from all the panelists about what are the highlights that you picked up during this State of the European Union speech. I will also tell the audience that now is the time, if you have some questions that you want to ask to the panelists and you want to make sure that your question, based on what has already been discussed so far, also make it to the Q&A session among the first ones, then now is the time to start writing those down in the chat or already now put yourself up on the queue using the raise hand function in the participants menu on Zoom. So if you have something you want to ask the panelists about what has been discussed so far, we're at halftime now, so of what has been discussed so far, please start writing your questions in the chat. But with that, let's move on to commenting the State of the EU speech, and we go first to Hanna.
Thank you, Sakke. Yes, so first of all, I would like to make a small comment and say that I was personally quite impressed by Ursula von der Leyen's speech. And not only the content of it, but what I mean, her rhetorical skills was good. And when you listen, my thought was that this EU Commission want to be ambitious in their work and want to be positive about the future. And we can just prepare it with her predecessor, Jean-Claude Juncker. For me, I think that von der Leyen is doing a much greater job when it comes to being a visible commissioner president, but also leading a commission in a better way, in the sense that the commission wants an equal representation of women and men as commissioners, but also that the commissioner cannot do what they want and get away with it. For example, we saw a couple of weeks back the former trade commissioner, Phil Hogan, that had to resign or resigned himself because he made a mistake that was not acceptable for a person in that influential position. But to summarize von der Leyen's speech in 2 sentences, first of all, I can summarize it by saying it was very long, and it was also a speech that wanted to please many of the groups in the European Parliament that she spoke in front of. And here I want us to remember that von der Leyen was not the European Parliament's first candidate to be the next president of the European Commission, because the member state went from the Spitzen candidate to choosing a former defense minister of Germany, Ursula von der Leyen. And here, and also in a time when the European Commission and the different groups in the European Commission are quite polarized when it comes to political views, I saw some tendency that she wanted to please these different groups. For example, when it comes to speaking about migration, she spoke about a human and humane approach, but in the same time she spoke about stricter external border and border controls. So you can see she wanted to please both sides of migration perspective, and also when it comes to the proposal on the new Green Deal. She put forward a more ambitious target of 25%, but in the same time, some also think that this is not sufficient. And also, she in the same time said that yes, but it will be hard, and many countries cannot do this up till 2030. So it was a bit pleasing all sides of the European Parliament, I would say. When it comes to her speaking about next generation EU and the response to the pandemic, but also speaking about digital transformation within the EU, I thought that was quite flat, and it was a very long statement about these aspects and sections. And I'm also quite skeptical that the European Commission will actually be successful with this rule of law criteria that says that you have to follow this rule of law criteria in order to get allocated money from next generation EU budget. On the same time, I can just summarize that I also take with me, for example, her takeaways with a more inclusive EU. She spoke about racism. She spoke about discrimination. She spoke about LGBTQ rights. For example, she stated a union where you can be who you are and love who you want. This is obvious, but in the same time, in this is polarized time, it was a clear statement that was necessary, unfortunately. And yeah, being yourself is not your identity, your ideology, it's your identity, and no one can take that away. Also, I take away, or key takeaways is also Ursula von der Leyen's address on external relations. And this is quite interesting as she called her commission as a geopolitical commission. And although I believe, and perhaps you also agree, the other panelists, that external relations could, or EU as a global player could have a larger role in the speech overall. She mentioned many actors. She mentioned the US and President Donald Trump. She mentioned Russia, and she mentioned Navalny, and also she made a statement about Nord Stream 2, for example, but also China, where she just took the EU strategy on China as a negotiating partner, an economic competitor, and a systemic rival. But also she spoke about the importance of good relations with the African Union, and of course also the situation in Belarus and the Union's relations with Turkey. So I would say that are my takeaway, or key takeaways from her speech, and also foremost perhaps her strong statements on moving on to qualified majority voting on EU's common security and foreign policy. So even though this is not new, she made this quite clear statement of what holds us back, why our simple statement on fundamental EU values delayed. So that was also a key takeaway, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. And we move on next to Jakob in Denmark. What are your key takeaways from Ursula von der Leyen's speech?
Well, I think this speech was very historic. We have never seen anything like this before. I'm not talking about the length of the speech, but the actual content in the speech. I agree very much with Hanna on many issues. And if I can just start where Hanna ended about the external relations with the EU, and I think this speech was indeed it had many points on geopolitics, important points, but with very little proposals for action. I'm not blaming her, I'm not blaming the European Union, but I'm blaming the member states. Because foreign policies is member states, they decide these things. It's not the EU. And von der Leyen, she had this buzzword about a geopolitical union, as Hanna said. And I think she has some visions, she has some good visions, but we still lack action. We can see this right now happening in the Eastern Mediterranean, where I think the EU should be more negotiable. We have to get into negotiations instead of just the French and the Greeks. And that's one of the things, but one of the points where I think she could have really talked about, and she could really said we want to push on these things. She, as Hanna mentioned, there was important things about the rule of law, but she still lacks to mention which member states actually break these very important things, like Hungary and Poland especially. I think it's really appalling as an EU citizen to witness these things, and I think she could have been much tougher on these points. But as Hanna said, she has to please many groups in the EU, especially the EPP group, which has the government party of Hungary. It's a part of that group. So I think that she could obviously have been more tougher on these things. But if I could take a Danish perspective on this speech, she has some important points about the social pillar of the EU. As you know, she has this vision about a minimum wage in the EU, and I think I speak for all the Nordic countries that we are not too pleased about those things, especially the unions. We have a high. We have collective bargainings when we decide salaries and wages for our for the workers. And this vision about a minimum wage is not too good news for the unions, for the labor unions in Denmark, in Sweden, in Finland. But she clearly said that she's an advocate for collective bargaining. And the proposal she is putting forward is respecting these things. And so I have a hard time understanding the worry from the labor unions in Denmark and Sweden and Finland. I think this was an important point, especially from a Danish perspective, that this is really what we pointed our eyes at. It was really important for Denmark, these things, but we're still not satisfied with it. Because we've seen with the EU court that they can elaborate further, they can try through and push these minimum wage to other to member states with even though she promised not to. So that's still a worry, but I don't think I think it would be suicide for the Commission to impose minimum wage in countries in Denmark and Finland and Sweden and Italy, where they have these collective bargaining. So that's that's a major point from this speech, and I think yeah, that was it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jakob. And then finally, let's move to Iiris as well to hear your takeaways from the speech.
Thank you. I think there have been a lot of great points here, and I agree to most of them, so I don't think I have to go through them, but to summarize, I think, a bit what was said and some of our ideas, I would go as well with the collective bargaining, because I think that was something that we haven't heard from Ursula von der Leyen before. And I think that is also an example of how the Nordic countries can really have influence on the EU and how we can lead the development in the way we want to, if we are brave enough to do that. So I think that is something that we can work on together and lead the way. But to summarize, I think the speech, or I think it's because of the system and the role of the Commission, but it is a bit like something for everyone. So basically, in Finnish we have a saying that if there's like something for everyone, there is really nothing for no one. But I think there was still something for everyone, but sort of the general atmosphere was very optimistic, and there were key points, for example, the COVID situation, the health union, EU for health program, and World Health Organization reforms that are very current and important. And also, as you mentioned, the human rights were discussed as a vital and fundamental issue in the EU. But what I still sort of am missing with the Commission and the President of the Commission is the actions. And I know that it's very hard role because you don't really have the mandate to do the things you want to do. So for example, I listed when I was listening to the speech, I listed some things, and then I was thinking like, yeah, but this is like the member state decide for this, and the member state decide for that, and the member state decide for the budget, and they just got the health program away from it. So it's sort of like, it's an important speech and the role is very important, but I understand her frustration that comes with the role, that you really you have to be bold and you're expected to have visions and stuff, but then the member states don't give you the mandate to actually do it. I have for this year, in many panels, I have said that the EU is as strong as the member states make it, because like the EU isn't something that just exists and thinks on its own. And I think in Finnish media, I don't know if the situation is similar in Denmark and Sweden, but when we have news on something, it's like EU decided something. But we always forget that it's the people and it's us that are the EU, and the Finnish ministers were discussing and making the decision. So it's very hard to discuss and go further a bit, but we always forget that the EU is something that we actually make, and every day we choose to make it. So I think that is something that the EU needs to work on. The climate view was very important also for us, and the carbon neutrality goals. But I don't think like how credible the actions we have seen are, and especially like the discussions. I don't know what is wrong with Finland, because when there was European elections, we had our parliamentary elections a month before, so we didn't really discuss European affairs. And now that there was the State of the Union speech, we had our national budget negotiations with the government, so we didn't really discuss this either. I was just going through Twitter to see if there is some like Finnish point of views or Finnish discussion, but it was like there was very little that I could grasp on. So I think like the challenge, there are a lot of challenges with the values and the climate and Corona and other, but the biggest challenge that was missing from the speech as well was how to get the citizen involved, how to get the citizen on board with this, how to get the citizen to give the mandate for the European Commission and the European Union to tackle the issues. So I think that is something that I sort of noticed missing, and would want to hear maybe your views on, or like put forward that we need to have the future. We had the Future of Europe forums, but I don't know what's going on with them now that the COVID messed with a lot of schedules and stuff. But I think we need more discussion on that.
Thank you very much, Iiris. And of course, it's a shame that many of those plans for the Conference on the Future of Europe didn't go as planned due to COVID. Hopefully, though, this transition to a more digital discussion culture can also facilitate that going forward. Now, I will actually move on to the Q&A session with questions from the audience. This is my favorite part of the game, because then I get to engage everyone else also in the audience of the meeting. we have one question from a person who wants to ask his question live, and I will take him as second. So I will ask one question from the chat first, and then the person who wanted to ask his question live will have his opportunity to do so. So the question that was first written into the chat comes from Heghine Alexanian, and her question is as follows. Do you think that the fact that each country wants to speak for itself, based on the note of Jakob previously, is the key factor that prevents European governance to deal with the new problems, for example, migration, and shape a more strategic way of thinking for the future? I will also post this question in the chat to all panelists, so you will be able to read it aloud as well. But basically, do you think that the fact that each country wants to speak for itself is the key factor that prevents European governance to deal with big problems and shape a more strategic way of thinking? Let's go to Hanna first.
Oh, challenging to try to start answering this question. Just shortly, I would say foremost yes, but a bit no as well. For me, or what I have seen, is that if all member states want to do something that they believe that you can do better together, and is in the interest of almost all member states, it will be a possibility for European governments to succeed or to develop. But in the same time, I agree with the statement that you want to have a lot of national competence. You want to for example, also decide on your own. That this, of course, challenges issues that need long-term thinking, long-term perspective, and are challenging. For example, the migration situation. So in that sense, I believe, since all EU member states have different views around this question, then when you have different views, then it's very difficult to have a common, to actually be able to compromise and negotiate. So foremost, yes, I believe that this statement is correct, but if it is in the willing of all, then I believe European governance can go quite far. We have seen this before, and I think we will see it in the future as well.
Thank you, Hanna, and appreciate the short and concise answers, since we have many questions in the panel now, or to the panel now in the chat. So let's move on to Jakob next.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately it's completely true. Is the hard truth about the EU. And as it was based on what the things I said, of course, I agree. But from a Danish perspective, I just have to be honest with you that we don't care about the EU. The average Dane doesn't care about the EU, and it's the same with Iiris, what she said. That where we cover news in Denmark is also just, oh, the EU has done that. It's not, no, we have done that. We are the EU. The member states are the EU. They don't write that because EU is a scapegoat for tough political hits in Denmark especially. And I would just say that if Europe was not about the individual member states' visions and views, then we would have had a united Europe by now, and we would have had a common strategy on migration, which is really relevant right now with the Moria camp in Greece, which have burned down. We would have went so much further with integrating and more collective solutions. And my national youth association is only 500 members. If the whole country was actually like, oh, we think EU is amazing, then I think we'll have thousands of members. But that's not the case, because we say, oh, we like the EU, but not too much. We have our opt-outs, as I explained before. We don't like the EU too much. So I think it's true, but we also have to look at the reality. I mean, the EU is passing more legislation than the United States is, and we are 27 different countries, and they are just one country. And that's an amazing point, and it's amazing to look at. So it's not. It sounds like I'm completely bad. It sounds completely bad, but I think that's the half truth. Thank you.
Thank you. And Iiris, do you want to answer this question as well?
Yeah, I think what Hanna said is really correct, because I think we have to have the qualified majority voting when it comes to our key values like human rights and stuff, and foreign policy. But at the same time, we have to keep everyone on board, because we see what happens when the governments and the people, well, on maybe false pretenses, but don't feel like they belong in the EU, and the Brexit is a key example for that. So we have to serve at the same time. We have to keep everyone on board, but we have to be a lot tougher when it comes to our key values.
Thank you. And now let's bring in a question from the audience live on the video. Now we have Nicholas tuning in from Sweden saying hi. Now, Nicholas, please ask your question to the panel.
Hello, thanks for giving me the floor. The question is for Iiris. You said in the beginning that you would like a federal Europe in the future. This is what I want too, but we see that when it comes to very central choices like Euro, Denmark has a permanent opt-out. Sweden does not want to discuss about this. So will we have a multi-speed Europe with some countries in the core and some in the periphery, or will we become more like a state? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it relates to what we just discussed about the majority voting. I think we need to be able to, well, not have a multi-speed Europe, because I think if we leave someone out now, they will never get so then we get like two levels of the like how Europe you feel. So I don't think that is, because we have to have like a European identity to be able to create a federal Europe. Yeah, so I think like I would like, because I noticed that there was a question about the Sweden and Denmark and their opt-out for the Euro. So I would be pleased if we have time to hear those ideas as well in the future. But I think we have to keep everyone on board and go one speed ahead, but we have to be more brave.
Thank you very much, Iiris. And I was actually just going to pick up that question from the chat as well. So we have a question coming in from Gokau Sinar. I hope I spelled the name correctly. And the question is, why are Sweden and Denmark so against the adoption of the euro? And what are the reasons behind it? And also, do you think the opinion of public will change anytime soon in the future? Are there any discussions at the government or public level for the adoption of the euro? I will give the question to Hanna first to answer, and then, then to Jakob as well.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to say that I'm not an expert on the issue on Sweden's opinion towards the euro or the EMU, but and I'm also quite interested in hearing Jakob's answer here. But first of all, regarding the first question against the adoption of the euro, so we had popular vote or a national vote in 2003 in Sweden, and then then the different opinion was it was mixed. So it was a slight majority against becoming a member in the monetary union. However, this has changed, and also I would say that the foremost reason behind it is actually the view that Sweden is better off standing outside, but also on a general note, perhaps also some key political figures that said that, for example, when it comes to identity and political system and economic system, that the European member states are too different in order to have the same currency. So that is what only one argumentation that was brought up then. But what have happened since then is that after the 2008 Euro crisis and the years after that and up until today, Sweden overall, and also different parties, different political parties and collective bargaining parts in Sweden are not positive towards becoming a member of the Euro anytime soon. For example, the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise that were for being part of the Euro, the monetary union, are now not taking that argumentation forward. So in my point of view, I don't think Sweden will be a part of the Euro anytime soon, actually. But I'm curious to hear what Jakob from the Danish perspective.
Yes, Jakob, will Denmark be a Euro country anytime soon?
Not in a million years. That's the sad truth, I think. Well, and there are three main reasons to this. First of all, we have our national pride in the currency. We like our queen on the currency. I like to say krona, krona, krona all the time. We have tried to change it in a referendum, but it didn't go too well. But the second reason is that looking at the reputation of the euro, as Hanna also said, with the debt crisis in Greece, no one wants to adopt the euro. It's a symbol of European disaster, and I think it's really sad that this is the truth. I think the euro is great. I think we should have the euro in Denmark, but it won't happen in a million years, as I have explained. And also the third point, Danish political parties that actually support the euro and have like good monetary policies, they won't fight for it. It's not popular in Denmark to fight for it, and if it's the citizens don't want the euro, then the political parties won't fight for it. So that's a simple truth. And I would also say that Denmark, we basically have the euro. I mean, we have our fixed exchange rate, so the exchange rate of the Danish currency, the kroner, is fixed with the euro. So Denmark has no monetary policy at all. We can't decide on are we devaluating or are we making the price go higher. So it doesn't really matter. So I think it's mainly about our national pride and our pride, and we're so proud of the krone. So no, it won't happen at all. I'm sorry to say.
So we have a prediction for the future that maybe in the year 1,000,021, Denmark might join the euro. We have one question coming in also from the audience from Christiana, and this is for all panelists. She asks you, what would be your advice to someone who wants to present his or her idea at the EU level to improve the well-being of the European Union, but does not know how to do it? Let's go to Iiris first.
Well, this is an excellent question, and this is something we have been pondering upon in Finland. Actually, we created as a JEF Finland something, I don't know how it translates, something, it's an call for action, maybe from the youth perspective, that we sort of created a system which is not in use yet, but everyone we have talked to about it like the Finnish MEPs and our national representatives say that it's a good idea. So maybe it will be in the future. If you want, you can join us to look for it. But we want to have a system for especially the young people that don't have the right to vote to affect the European politics, because it's always like said that, oh, we have such a bright-minded youth and the future is so good, but we are already here now and we want to be heard. So we have created a system where in each member state the young people could post their calls for action and then vote in each country, which will be the national idea. And then whoever has created the idea will have will go to the European Parliament to present it, and the Parliament will discuss the matter. So I think these are some because obviously the EU isn't gonna do a lot for taking the youth into consideration. So this is something that has to come from us youth. And I think youth organizations, for example, the European youth organizations in each country or any political party youth organizations are a key way for youth right now to affect politics. So I think like you have to have a voice or something you want to say, and then amplify it, get people who think like you around you, and then just be heard, because no one is gonna come and ask you. You have to do it that yourself.
Thank you, Iiris. And in Sweden, is it that you only call Hanna and Hanna will take the message forward, or how does it work?
That is one way to do it. No, but of course, national consultation with, for example, youth, which I work with, youth own vision and perspective is important. But I would also like to highlight that EU is influencing both local, regional, and national level as well. And therefore, a specific advice is to actually speak and put forward your views with local politicians, but also people working at agencies at a regional and national levels, because they work with their counterparts in the EU or with the other member states. It is a system that is all linked together. So that is, don't forget local, regional, and national level, and there you can affect a lot, and that will also affect the EU level at the same time as the EU level affects local level a lot. And also another concrete advice: speak with your members of parliament in the EU, for example. They're quite pleased, or the Swedish parliament members are quite pleased to speak with you. So that is also a different way to go directly to the EU level, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Jakob, this is the same question to you as well. What advice would you have to give?
Yeah. Well, we are forging the union right now. We are influencing the European Union right now. When we're debating, when you're a participant at the debate, we're trying to model the union, we're talking about it. So that's something you should definitely do. Come to these events and let's talk about the future of the EU. But I also agree with Iiris and Hanna that you should join a youth association. You should join JEF, especially. As myself, I'm myself a part of this of the JEF. You should just come to JEF. It's amazing. We can influence the EU in a huge way, but also join national political youth organizations and political parties. That's very important too. And it's a sort of narrative that the EU is kind of far away from the ordinary citizen, but I don't think this is true. I think we actively distance ourselves from the EU when we just think, oh, it's just something down in Brussels. I can have no say in what's going on, but you can, as I have explained. And as Hanna said, you can approach a parliamentarian. You can always go to his office and say, I wish to talk to you. Can we have a coffee or something? So that's something you should definitely do. So yeah, but my main point, join JEF. Thank you.
So now we got to enjoy a small commercial break as well at the very end. But now this is actually where our time is up. Time is now 15 minutes past 5 here in Sweden. That means 15 minutes past 6 in Finland and Estonia, and whichever country in that time zone you are tuning in from. I will just want to end and conclude the panel with a quote from Jakob in the very beginning of the panel. We can shape Europe, and we are shaping Europe already at the moment. So thank you very much for shaping Europe for 1 hour and 15 minutes together with me, all panelists, Iiris, Hanna, and Jakob. And now I will also just give the floor back to Kirke for some final words.
And thank you all so much for participating. Huge thanks to our panelists for giving us this interesting session. And huge thanks to Sakke for actually moderating the whole thing. So this is it for today. We'll see you all tomorrow at 11 Central European time then. At the keynote session, where the president of the Nordic Youth Council, Nicolas Kujala, will address all the Nordic youth who are interested in foreign affairs and international politics. So see you all there.